Today I'm going to be talking about the first book in Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn series. Now, I am usually a romantasy girl.
I'll never let go.
Sarah J. Maas, Red Queen, Shatter Me, stuff like that. And I put off reading Brandon Sanderson's work because I had the impression that it was more fantasy than romantasy, if that makes sense. Like, romance just kind of took more of a lower subplot situation. And being someone who primarily reads for the relationship part of a story, I just wasn't sure if it was for me. But then Brandon Sanderson posted this video to social media of him slamming down a manuscript that he had just finished that he apparently had told no one about. And it was this secret project that he did while he was on vacation, because apparently this man writes like the wind. People were going absolutely feral in the comments, and I knew I wanted to be a part of the fandom.
Yes!
I'd heard from several places that the best book of his to start with is Mistborn, and I can't believe how long I waited to read this book. It has been out for like, I think 10 years, maybe longer. It was so incredibly good. It has one of the best society setups and magic systems. It's so unique. People, it's weird to try and explain, but people eat metal and then they'll burn it. And you can only do this if you have, you know, the specific magical power in you. And then there's some people who can only use one metal, and then there's some people who can use all the metals. They can make you stronger, or if you're burning the right metal, then you can like see little laser pointers telling you where metals are that you can use. It's so cool, and you can use it to push and pull yourself. So you can sort of pull on a metal and move yourself forward, but the problem is you have to be very careful because your body is a counterweight, and if you go too hard and you miscalculate, you could die. But is that not like one of the coolest magic systems? Because I feel like a lot of the magic that I read, it's very fae-based or spell-based, if that makes sense. But with using the metals, which is called allomancy in this world, you have very specific rules that you can abide by. And so even if you can use all of the metals, you still have restrictions where, you know, it can make you super strong, or you can see a little bit into the future, like those very specific powers that you can use. You're not just like an all-powerful being. Of course, our main character, Vin, is one of those special people who can use all of the metals, which makes her a Mistborn. Mistborns usually only exist in the higher tiers of society. At the very top, they have the Lord Ruler, who is sort of their combination of a king and a god. Then you have his enforcers, so obligators and inquisitors. These people are creepy, and they're very much like peacekeeper vibes. Then there's nobility, and then just like normal people, and then the lowest tier of society is the Ska. In the story, our main character, after finding out that she's a Mistborn, ends up needing to infiltrate high society as a nobility in the effort to help the Ska and lower classes kind of rise up. I don't want to give too much else away. I personally went into it pretty blind, like I didn't know anything about it, and I really enjoyed that and just kind of like unpacking as I went along. So if you have not read it, please go read it and then come back so we can discuss. Goodbye, people who have not read this. All right, let's get into it. We start off the story meeting this guy named Kelsier. He is going to different cities and towns and trying to stir up the Ska. The problem is the Ska, this lowest tier of society, they have been beaten down as slaves for so long that the general consensus is that they are simply too tired to ever revolt. And it's really hard for him to sort of stir up this morale of people who are so completely broken. He's trying to go through and find, you know, the couple pockets of places that he can kind of latch onto and get them excited to potentially overthrow the Lord Ruler, which is his overall goal in this book. During this process, he finds our main character, Vin, which the book sort of follows Kelsier on occasion, but in my personal opinion, Vin is our main character. She is part of this sort of street crew. Their leader's name is Kamen, but it's not like a found family situation. She's very much scared for her life. These people have band together sort of for mutual survival, but at the same time, they would turn on you for anything. She is just super abused by these people. It's constant yelling. Her brother would beat her before he left. The one person that she even kind of trusts and tells that she's maybe gonna try and leave and strike out on her own, sells her out to their leader, who like is almost gonna kill her until Kelsier shows up and decides to like take over this crew basically. And he's actually nice. Of course, Vin doesn't trust anyone. She has genuinely never had anyone to trust, and then anyone that she's even sort of attached to, they have left her. So she really is very skeptical, but he realizes that she has allomantic powers. So he wants to see, you know, how far she can take this, because some people can only use one metal and they have different names for it, but someone who can use all of them is Mistborn. So if you can use 2 or more metals, that means that you can use all of them. And so he kind of tests her powers out a little bit and realizes pretty quickly that she is Mistborn like he is. And he's very smart and calculating. So he knows that if he wants a Scar rebellion to eventually overthrow the Lord Ruler, he needs to kind of mess with this layer of nobility in their society, because it almost feels like they are the main gatekeeper between overthrowing the Lord Ruler and these lower classes right now. Because as long as the nobility are, you know, fully devoted to the Lord Ruler, it's going to be very difficult for the Ska to like rise up, because the nobility would beat them down. So they start planning a house war between these noble houses. And in the background, we know that Kelsier has sent people out to different areas of like their continent to stir up Ska rebellion while he's planning this downfall of all the nobility. And they've already started this process a little bit. They are getting weapons through who appears to be a nobleman, but Kelsier has actually killed him, and he has a hired Khandra in this nobleman's place. So that means this creature who ate the bones and body of the nobleman that Kelsier killed, and he's now pretending to be this person. It is so creepy. Some of these creatures, it's terrifying. But the Khandra can't actually go infiltrate the nobility, because the Inquisitors, those people who worked for the Lord Ruler, would know that it's a Khandra. And so they need a sort of middleman to represent the nobility that is not this guy who actually looks like a noble. Enter Vin. They are going to have her pose as this nobleman, Lord Renew's, like, long-lost niece. She's gonna start going to their balls and events and stuff like that to infiltrate and try to spy. But the thing is, Vin grew up in the streets. She's very unrefined. It's very My Fair Lady / Princess Diaries. So she shows up and she meets this terraceman who they're also their own little echelon of society above the Ska, but they're still very much considered like servants and slaves. But his name is Sazed, and he is basically Joe from the Princess Diaries. His entire job is to help Vin pretend to be Lady Volette, which is her nobility name. She gets a haircut to make her look more feminine and nobility presentable. He teaches her to dance and how to talk and like just how to act in the society, and he's so fun. And he's super interesting because he is sort of a walking library. Specifically, his people, each of them have their own sort of thing that they specialize in, and his is religions. He's memorized like 4,000 religions or something like that. That becomes important later, but in the meantime, Kelsier asks Sazed to look after Vin. So Vin goes to her first ball, and at this point, she doesn't know how to dance, and the whole point of these balls is for people to like sort of mingle, but also like this is where the young nobility sort of pair up and eventually find like their spouse. And so she's getting asked a lot to dance, and it's really uncomfortable, but she does a good job being like, oh, this is my first ball, I'm just so overwhelmed, I couldn't possibly dance. And I was like, oh, this is like kind of uncomfortable. Enter Elend Venture, who is at this point we don't know, but he is like the most important nobility kid, and he just reads a book while he's sitting next to her, and she's just like, this is very weird. And she sort of challenges him a bit, and Elend really likes that, because I think for the most part people don't challenge him in that way because of his high status. But since Vin doesn't know, she sort of prods him a little bit and makes fun of him. And over the course of the story, as they go to more of these events, they talk more and more. Eventually she does figure out like how important he is, because Sazed's like, maybe not that one. And we do see her really starting to like him. And Kelsier, who for the longest time, I was trying to figure out if Kelsier was a love interest. No, this man's like a full grown man, and then Vin is like 17. Elend's like 21. It took me so long to catch on to the ages. I don't know if I missed it in the first like chapter or something, but I fully was like, is Kelsier going to be jealous? No, he wasn't. He is more of a father figure to her. And he's like, oh no, poor little Vin is falling in love with this guy. And that could seriously, one, jeopardize their entire mission. And two, just like jeopardize her as a person. If she gets found out, like, that's almost immediate death. Not almost, like immediate death. But over the course of this time, Vin figures out that Elend has been reading books that criticize the Lord Ruler. She prods a lot more than she should about this, and eventually ends up thinking that he can be trusted. And at this point in the story, I was like, he cannot be trusted. I did not expect at all for him to be a good guy. And she tells Kelsier and Sazed this because she wants to bring him into their plans. But Kelsier, he knows a lot more about the nobility because Elend, even though it ends up he's actually kind of serious about this, his friends probably aren't. And he's like, you can't trust what they're saying. Like, they're just drinking and complaining. Like, they're not actually on our side. And we get a scene to sort of drive this idea home is when a ska boy gets brought out. Everyone's just like getting into their cars for the night after this event. They're all dressed in finery and they bring this ska kid over and like murder him. I forgot what he did, but it wasn't like I don't think it was a big offense. Vin watches all these nobility, like not even bat an eye at this happening, and she herself is ska. So it's a good moment for us to remember that the nobility aren't on our side. We get to see a lot of really interesting glimpses of how the magic system works, and not just through our characters using it, you know, for themselves. We get this one scene of Kelsier. He's trying to, remember, like stir up hints of rebellion in these people. And he goes and visits one of their strongholds and things are not going well. It sounds like people are genuinely about to give up. There's this one guy who's like ready to leave and he's kind of getting other people stirred up against the rebellion. And so he goes one-on-one in a duel with this really, like, he's small, a small man, like going to get killed. And Kelsier is seeing this and he's able to use his allomancy to have this guy, it feels like the, like, just wimpy guy, like the one who no one expects, to beat this dude who's huge. And it's sort of used in a way where Kelsier's like, look at what the spirit of rebellion can do for you, like, believe in this. Like, he doesn't say that he's using allomancy to help the guy, obviously, but it shows like how far Kelsier is willing to go, because sort of throughout the story, I started to wonder if Kelsier was actually a good guy, because it was really giving like President Coin, if that makes sense. So like, you know, the person who you're just under a different version of the leader, not necessarily a better one, because at this point we hadn't met the Lord Ruler, and all we were really seeing was Kelsier using allomancy to not trick people into the rebellion, but to manipulate their emotions, and in this case, like, manipulate how they saw the rebellion. And it doesn't feel good. He's even allowing people to sort of see him as more than a person, which is what really set up red flags for me, and I think for the other characters too, because they later confront him about this, where people are like, oh, this is the survivor of the pits where, you know, nobody escapes that prison. And he never downplays it. When we're in his head, we get notes of him being like, oh, this is like deeply uncomfortable. But he doesn't ever tell them like, no, I'm not special, you know, like, it's all of us. Like, no, he lets himself be that leader for them. Back with Vin, she's studying the Lord Ruler's logbooks, and she's trying to just collect as much information as she can. And during this, she learns about pheromancy from Sazed. And so this is a different form. It's not allomancy, but it's similar, where instead of burning metals to do things, they can burn metals in a way that like lets them trade off. Like, they're not pulling power from the metal, they're pulling power from themselves, but using the metal to do it. So for example, like if you knew you were going to need to infiltrate somewhere and pretend to be some 20-year-old, but you're actually 40 or 50, you could look 80 for a little while, and then when you need to pull your age back down, you could do that, but only for as much time as you spent being 80. It's so interesting. In general, I feel like Sazed is our Dumbledore of the story. And he also explains to her that Spook, this little, I think he's 15, he's just the cutest. He's like the youngest member of their squad. And he gave Vin a handkerchief, which means that he wants to court her. He really likes her. And Elend has also given her a handkerchief. And so Vin's like, I don't know what to do about this situation. And it's so cute because she has to tell Spook, like, there's nothing here, but you're the cutest. But that's the reason she knows about the handkerchief thing when Elend gives her a handkerchief, because they show up to a ball and she tells him way too much, first of all. She's talking about like the ska and trying to figure out his feelings around it, and I understand what she's trying to do, but she really reveals way too much about herself. And then he gives her the handkerchief. And I was like, he did that to like lure her in or something. I had no faith in Elend until the end of the book. It's around this time that one of the rebel collections are starting to get a little too confident, and so they decide that they're going to attack. I think it's like a nobility army or something. I honestly don't remember, but somebody that they're obviously against, and they want to get their energy out. Kelsier finds out about this, and Vin wants to go with him to help. And I'm like, at what point, like, how are you going to help? You're only 2 people. Even with allomancy, it just seems like it's not going to work. And by the way, they're super far away, like 2 months worth of boating. And Kelsier tells her if they burn tin, which makes them, stronger and physically better, if they run, they can make it. And I was like, 2 months by boat and you're gonna make it. And they almost do. They run for 16 hours. Which, like, to me, this magic system, because it was so detailed, it's one of those, like, believable magic systems. Like, when they did this, I was just like, what are we doing? Like, it just seemed wild. And I know it's supposed to be like a really intense moment of them running for 16 hours and they're almost collapsing, and Kelsier's so worried about Vin because he's like, I've pushed myself to this level, but she could die if she ends up burning up all the tin, and then her body just can't handle the aftermath of that type of activity. Like, she could die. Well, I was laughing because I was like, 16 hours of running? Are you joking? By the time they get there, they are too late, and that army has been slaughtered, which is like horrible news because it was one of the biggest like pockets of rebellion that they had, and they were going to be relying on that army to beat the Lord Ruler. And at this point, the loss is so bad that the rest of the crew is asking Kelsier, is the time where we give up? Do we just kind of throw in the towel? Because they're not going to be able to recover that many people in any sort of reasonable timeline. Kelsier says no, and this is sort of when the rest of the crew goes off on him, because they have also realized that Kelsier's setting himself up to be a myth, sort of. They're talking about how he's the survivor, how he has this 11th medal that people don't know about, and that could potentially defeat the Lord Ruler. And they're like, are you being serious? Like, you seem like you're setting yourself up to be the next Lord Ruler. And right at this time, there is a public execution that they all have to go to, where several ska are, I think they're beheaded. And Kelsier sort of uses this moment to snap back at them and say, you have to trust me, because this can't keep happening. And he's like, if you're gonna be part of my crew, you cannot continue to question me like this, which I didn't love. I understand where he was coming from, because he can't move forward on a sinking ship, but at the same time, Vin makes a note that everyone was still thinking this way, just no one was saying it. Vin ends up at another ball as Lady Valette, and Elend tells her everything. He knows that there's gonna be a house war, and he wants her to leave the city before that happens, because at this point, he still thinks that she's just a noble lady from the country who can't handle this. He also tells Vin that his family mines atium, which is one of the metals, for the Lord Ruler. So they're completely dependent on him for their source of income. And atium is the absolute most expensive metal because it's the most valuable. When you take atium and burn it, first of all, it burns super quickly. And then also it shows you a step ahead of, your opponent is going to be doing. So if somebody's in a knife fight, they can see where their opponent's next step is going to be and just make sure the dagger is there to meet them. It's very powerful. And right after he tells her all this, of course, Vin, I don't know how this happened. Elend's friends saw Vin obviously get into her carriage to leave. And they're still under the guise that she's Lady Volette. And one of them, for whatever reason, followed her and saw that when her carriage arrived to its destination, she was not in it anymore. And that part of the trip was fake. She somehow got out of the carriage at some point. And so he knows, like, I don't know, like, what level of spy she is, if she's just spying for this other nobility house. Like, that seems to make the most sense at that time to him. But he knows something's up with her. And so at the next ball that House Ventura throws, Elend is pretty cold to her, obviously. But at this point, Vin is completely in love, which this is the one part of it being more of a plot-driven story as opposed to romance story that felt a little bit forced to me, because I feel like I'm so used to seeing so much like playful banter, sweet scenes, like all this stuff leading up to the point of a character falling in love, that I was like, Vin, you're not really in love. Like, you've only seen him like 5 times. But I mean, she is full send, I'm saving Elend no matter what, because she finds out at this ball, Elend's father has put someone in place to assassinate him. But because of this, we get to see Vin go like full Allomancy warrior. It's amazing. She finds an informant that's among the nobility, like one of the noblewomen who she thought is just a gossip, but she knows like all this information about what's going to go down tonight. And the way that Vin just uses her power so forcefully to like mess with her emotions to the point that this woman is like, oh my gosh, like, you're Mistborn. And she can't help but give up her secrets. And Vin is so forceful about it. I love it so much, because for so much of the story, I feel like she is very reserved and she's calculating, but she's not like mean. And we got to see a little like spiciness from her, and it was great. Vin runs after Elend to try and stop his assassination and finds out that Shan, one of the other noblewomen who was at one point engaged to Elend, has been sent to kill him, and that she is also Mistborn. Vin kills Shan, like, in a battle. And the thing is, she's not supposed to be able to do this. She has been Mistborn for all of 5 seconds and hasn't had the proper training at all. No proper fight training. It's just like, she should not have been able to beat Shan, and she does it. And this is kind of one of our first glimpses into the fact that Vin is like beyond special. And at this point, she can get through the copper clouds. So Mistborn can burn copper to sort of hide the fact that they're Mistborn from people who would be able to tell. So like, especially Inquisitors, they can tell if someone's Mistborn, but if you're burning copper, it's supposed to be like a mask. But Vin can see through it, and that is really not supposed to happen. And that's when Vin starts suspecting that the Lord Ruler can do that too. When she gets back to the crew and she tells them what happened, and the fact that, you know, she's revealed that she's a Mistborn and all this stuff went down and that she saved Elend's life. And at this point, Kelsier wants all of the nobility dead. He's totally fine with stirring up a house war because he's like, I just hope that they kill each other on their way out. And they really chastise her about saving Elend, and she explodes on them because they aren't like street ska. They don't know how bad it can get. And she's like, you're nobility too, because like compared to her past life, like they have it all. And so she kind of blows up on them, and this really changes Kelsier's perspective. And that's something I did really like about Kelsier's storyline, is that he takes Vin really seriously, like despite the fact that he's significantly older and she's just like a young girl without, you know, much past education or anything like that. He really like takes what she says and what she thinks to heart. And I think that's what built their relationship, specifically the father-daughter dynamic of their relationship, in a way that felt believable and not like he was trying to take advantage of her. Kelsier returns to the pits where he was imprisoned and where his wife was murdered. And we get a glimpse of like what he was having to do. There's geodes in these pits that contain atium, so that really expensive metal, and you have to go underwater and like mine it and hope that someone else doesn't fight you underwater for your geode. And it's just, at least I think they're underwater. Are they underwater? That was the impression I got. Like, you can't breathe down there. Like, we see just how brutal it was for years. If you didn't come back with a geode every day, like, you were gonna get like murdered. And the reason they're having prisoners do it is because you can't use any metals in the pits where the atium is mined. Like, it has to be through this extremely hard labor. And Kelsier blows it up. And so at this point, you're not going to be able to mine atium for hundreds of years. It's going to take so long for that to recover. And we're at this point led to believe that the Lord Ruler is all powerful and able to have so much more like magic in him than other people because he's hoarding tons of atium. By the time Kelsier gets back, Spook and a bunch of the other people in their squad have been captured. This is a very important moment in the story, in my opinion, because Vin is sort of like, you know, that's horrible, but let's leave before that becomes us. And Kelsier is like, no, like that's not what friends do. Like we're not leaving them. And this sets a really good example for Vin later on. And they believe the reason that they're getting captured is because one of their guys, Marsh, they believe was killed and broken under interrogation. During this battle, Elend is about to be killed and Kelsier saves him solely because of Vin, but because his opinion has been changed over time. And then like all of a sudden, I was just not expecting the Lord Ruler to come out so quickly, but he's out there and multiple spears go through this man and he's fine. And we get to the point where Kelsier is going to take him on and everybody's like watching because Kelsier is the survivor. Kelsier is the one with the 11th medal and he dies so quickly. Like the Lord Ruler puts one spear through him and he's done. It didn't even feel like a fight. And I was just so confused because I was like, we have many a book coming after this one. How is it possible that one of our main characters and the leader of this rebellion is dead? And I just didn't believe it for a really long time. But shortly after, Kelsier is coming up as a sort of religious figure because he was killed. Someone even starts saying that they saw Kelsier after he died. And this is eerie because the entire book, Kelsier was asking Sazed, who knows all this stuff about religions, what makes a religion effective? What is going to be the driving factor behind getting people to believe in something and have faith in something? I kind of brushed that idea aside for a really long time because I was like, it doesn't, like, yeah, he just wants to know what would make people excited. He wants to know what would get people riled up for the rebellion. But that whole time, Kelsier was figuring out that they needed, like, the man, the myth, the legend to believe in. And so he let himself die. And then he ordered a Khandra, like they did for that nobleman, great foreshadowing, to eat his body and pretend to be him. Because once they eat the bones in the body, they can make it look like they are whoever they just ate. And so the Khandra had to eat him while he was still fresh enough, this is disgusting, to take on his look. Because later when Vin sees this Khandra, she's like, oh my gosh, it looks exactly like Kelsier except for the eyes. Like, it's missing the spark of life. But it was enough to get all these people to be like, I saw Kelsier after he died. Like, he's alive somewhere. He's leading this rebellion. It was just, that is how the religion was formed. And that's why Kelsier knew that the only thing strong enough to get the Ska to rebel was for them to like believe in him the way they would believe in the Lord Ruler. Because at this point, the Lord Ruler is like not only their leader, but also their god. And so he needed to give them a god in a new religion to believe in. And he became that person. But like at this point, I feel like the crew, the squad, they have enough experience in them to do this, but they don't have any leader at this point. And Doxson, who was sort of second in command, and he's the guy behind the scenes who makes everything happen. He's like the logistics guy. He, in my opinion, doesn't have the charisma that they would need. And so I feel like we're kind of left without a leader here because I don't think Vin could be the leader either, at least not where she is right now. She does have a very Katniss personality, and like Katniss, you know, she led the rebellion in the Hunger Games, but it feels like in this world, this just wouldn't work. And also, she's kind of mad at Kelsier because everyone, and she told him this, everyone in her life has left her at some point, and obviously Kelsier had this plan and he had a reason, and he's dead, which isn't necessarily the same as voluntarily leaving, but he did die voluntarily, so she's just very much upset about this whole situation. And she was like, this was the one person that I finally trusted to be there for me, and he left too. And she gets this letter from him, and it's really heartfelt. he left her the 11th medal. He did find one. And the whole time we're learning about this metal magic system. And the whole point is that they're pairs of metal. So like, you know, the ones that work together are alloys. I don't know chemistry super well, but they're like a pair of metal could maybe help you push or pull yourself. And we thought for the whole time that atium and gold were, you know, a pair because they let you see directly into the future a little bit, and then the gold would let you see different versions of yourself, which sort of feels like seeing the past, but they're not alloys. And so we have this 11th metal and theoretically a 12th one because gold and atium would both need their pair, but he says he couldn't figure out what it was for. And he also says that it was his plan to kill the nobility on his way out, and he didn't because she changed his mind. And then he also says that he will tell his wife, Mare, in the afterlife about Vin. And he's like, she always wanted a daughter. And I was like, no. And then Vin does the stupidest of things. She tries to go into this room that Kelsier has failed twice to break into. And by failed, I mean like caught by inquisitors. Failed. And I know that Vin is, you know, like a special Mistborn. She has extra power to her, it seems. But if Kelsier, who has been using allomancy forever and knows his way around all this stuff, like what makes Vin think that this is a good choice to try and go in this room and figure out what's in there? Which at this point, I think it's gotta be the 12th medal. Cut to Elend, who is now having this realization that he's on the wrong side of history. He finds out that Lady Valette was actually Vin, who is a Ska and a Mistborn, and seeing Valette and falling for her has really humanized the Ska for him, which I don't know if I missed it or if it was just not mentioned, but the way he talks about the Ska makes it seem like he thinks they're super, super different. Like they're not just humans at the bottom of the food chain. It seemed like for a really long time, I thought they were different like species, but obviously if Vin can, you know, go into their society and nobody know the difference, they obviously all look human. But I guess like Elend was just so far past thinking that they were humans with real emotions and stuff that it took that much for him to realize that the nobility was really doing something wrong. But, you know, just in the nick of time, because Elend's dad is going to be leaving because the house war is going to be happening and he doesn't want to die. And so Elend says he's not going with him. Because at this point, if Elend goes with his dad, he's going to get killed anyways. So he stays with all of their servants and stuff because Elend's dad is escaping by himself, basically, with just, you know, their family. And so all these servants and people are left to be killed. And so Elend is now like in charge, which I feel like he just doesn't have as much like leadership experience as he probably should have at this point in his life. And he's just like, okay, so I'll figure this out. That's when he shows up to Doxon and asks for help and asks for a truce. Meanwhile, Vin gets caught trying to get into that room because of course she does, because everyone gets caught going into that room. And obviously they know she's Mistborn, and they're like, how is a Ska a Mistborn? That's not supposed to happen. And then it comes to light that, I mean, Vin already knew this, but her dad is an Inquisitor, and Inquisitors are supposed to kill the Ska women that they're with because to avoid this issue of a Mistborn ending up in the Ska ranks. Like they are supposed to kill them. Apparently that didn't happen, and they literally murder him right away for this like betrayal. I didn't expect that, but it's like the second that it's revealed that he's her dad, they don't even have like a minute to talk and her to be like, tell him off or whatever. No, like immediately murdered. But through this, she also finds out that her brother didn't tell on her. Her brother was tortured and he didn't break and tell them about Vin because they thought that Vin was either didn't exist or was dead. Like they didn't think there was anyone else. And her brother, the whole time, like the whole book, Vin remembers her brother being like, don't trust anyone, don't trust even me, like I will trade you for, you know, a quarter. But at the end of the day, he held up under severe torture for her. She is now in jail, and Sazed shows up, and he has been saving his strength for who knows how long because he can use Pheromancy, and he saved up his strength, and now he becomes like Beast Sazed and breaks her out of jail. But because he, you know, used all of that all at once, Sazed gets caught and he physically can't escape, even though he is pretty powerful. And he's telling Vin to run, and Vin, you know, looking up to the example of Kelsier, is like, I'm not leaving you here. And it was a nice full circle moment because the whole time Vin is like, there's never been anyone that I would, do that for, basically. But now she finally understands love and trust and friendship, and it's great. Especially because Elend shows up and saves the day because she was going to end up dying, as they said. At this point, Vin is like, you know what, while I'm here, why don't I take out the Lord Ruler? I was like, go get out of here. But she goes into his, I guess the throne room. I don't know where we are at this point, but she's burning gold and she thinks, if I can burn gold and see these different versions of the past ruler and who he would have become depending on different pasts and stuff, if I kill one of those like echoes of his ghost, maybe we hurt the real one, which isn't a bad plan, but it doesn't work. At this point, one of the Inquisitors seems like he's on our side. And then we find out that it's Marsh, who we thought had been skinned alive and betrayed them. But no, he is now an Inquisitor and he takes out another Inquisitor. And the way that he does this is he pulls a nail out of one of the Inquisitors because they are held together by nails. I don't remember why. I don't know why they do this, but there's like nails in their eyes, nails holding their like ribs and all that together, and then there's the one nail in the back, and if you pull that nail out, the whole Inquisitor dies. It's a very graphic moment, but Marsh is there and he tries to help, but then he gets knocked out. This is when Vin realizes that the Lord Ruler is using what we think has to be pheromancy. And she like uses the power that, tells you where the metals are and where the magic is and stuff like that. And she sees these like cuffs around the Lord Ruler's arms. And she realizes that he's pulling power from that metal. So if she can get the metal off of him, then like he's, almost more mortal. And she does. And then she like throws them out the window. And then the Lord Ruler shrivels up like Mother Gothel at the end of Tangled. And the Lord Ruler is trying to tell her, like, as he's rapidly aging, because he's been using pheromancy for who knows how long to look young and healthy. He says that she's making a mistake. And at that moment, she's like, nah, and like kills him. But later on, she's like, wonder what he was saying about it being a mistake. And then we get this note about the deepness, some dark power that the Lord Ruler has been holding off. Theoretically, the Lord Ruler defeated this power at the Well of Ascension, but I mean, if we're mentioning it now, it's probably coming back. Also, Elend is king. So he, I guess because he was paired up with Dachshund and all of the other nobility have sort of fled a little bit. I don't know how he's king, but he is at the moment. And then at the very end of the book is about to go off on her own. She's like, I'm done. But then she feels that pull, that tug of family and love and all that stuff. And she comes back and she goes to see Elend. And then that's sort of the end. And so obviously, like, this wasn't a cliffhanger in the way that I am used to reading cliffhangers, where it's just like they're at this dire point. It feels sort of stable at the moment. And since the Lord Ruler actually is dead, like we see him shrivel up into nothingness, I was kind of left with like, what is book 2 gonna be about? Like, I'm guessing the deepness has to come up if it was mentioned specifically at the end of the book. So I feel like there's 3 options here of what we're going to see in book 2. Either Elend's father and the nobility are going to come back and challenge him because Elend is now like king. Or Elend himself becomes a bad ruler and Vin is going to have to face him down. They're both Mistborn, so that could be a really good end battle scene. I hope that's not it because I do want Vin and Elend to be together. I think they have really good chemistry by the end of the book. I really believed in them more as a couple. But at the same time, I had such reserved, like, oh, I don't know about this guy for so long that I could see him turning into a bad king. Or he's a bad king that Vin has to help somehow. That could happen. Third option is the deepness shows up. Whatever power is lurking here that the Lord Ruler has been fending off for so long shows back up because it's like, there's nothing in my way now except for this little 20-year-old king. I'm very excited to see what happens. Overall, I loved this book. I thought it was just so detailed. Like, I love the world so much that I'm excited to keep going. I would love to know what your favorite part is. I am partial to like the dance ball scenes with the dresses and all that. Like I love that stuff in fantasy stories. So those and like seeing the like nobility gossiping and talking about each other and figuring all that stuff out. I liked that part of it. And then I also liked just seeing how the powers worked. Like especially when Kelsier is showing her how to use her powers. I thought that was a really fun scene. Even though this world does creep me out a little bit with these creatures that eat people's bones and stuff. That was not my favorite part of the book. Please like this video if you liked it. Click subscribe if you want to talk about more book stuff. My name's Caitlin. Thanks for watching. Bye.